Having been approached by then Chairman of the National Trust regarding the rich heritage of Argyll, the IADC's Board of Directors agreed with and funded a cultural heritage plan proposed by the National Trust. This plan includes the retrieval and documentation of archaeological artifacts discovered during earthworks at Argyll, the preservation of the derelict sugar mills at Escape and Argyll Gardens, the preparation of a book to document the cultural heritage of Argyll, and the relocation of the affected petroglyphs at Yambu. In January 2009, the first group of archaeologists from Bison Historical Services, in conjunction with the University of Calgary, Canada, arrived at Escape to carry out archaeological excavation. This process lasted just over 2 months and resulted in the retrieval of numerous artifacts and skeletal remains. For the first time in the history of the Windward Islands, a longhouse was discovered as well as the first pot burial.
We've been finding pottery in St. Vincent for years and years and years, since the days of Dr. Kirby, and a lot of that is in the National Trust Museum. But what has come up in the last 2 years is that we're finding evidence of structures, and these structures, we believe some of them are houses that the Amerindian people lived in. So it's quite exciting to actually find that on this site here there's a 35-meter long house, and the post holes are here. And in the second site that was excavated just last week, there seems to be a second long house. There's also a couple of round houses that might be from different ages. One across behind where you're standing is probably from the time about 1500, 1200 AD, and it's got Suezoid pottery near it.
According to archaeologists, those findings have the potential to change the history of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, since according to them, some of their findings could be close to or more than 2,000 years old, dating back to the Saludoid period.
Here we have another individual. There is some pottery associated with it. You can see the left arm, the humerus, and the radius and ulna. And here you see the radius and ulna plus some of the fingers. So one of the hands, it's on the shoulder. Yeah, so it certainly has its arms crossed. Part of one here, it is a long bone fragment, so it's probably part of a leg, perhaps. It certainly looks big enough for sort of a leg bone, as is the one over there. So these are some of the ones. There's one over there that's extended, and we've started excavating that one.
But there's so many here. This probably was a burial ground. With so many.
It's not. I wouldn't. Yes, it's probably a burial ground, but not in the sense of how we think of burial grounds. Because over 2,000 years of occupation, they usually just buried them wherever they very close to the house. In fact, sometimes they buried them inside the house. Sort of brought them luck having the ancestors with them. And they had different methods of dealing with the deceased. In some cases, they put them in the ground and left them there, what we call sort of primary burial. And in other cases, they took them out and took the bones apart and buried some of those bones in the house or in a special place. And those are what we call secondary burials. So they had different ideas about the ideology behind sort of dealing with the dead.
This was a surprise dig for us, and we are indeed so happy that the Airport Development Company, with the experts that are on the board and working with the government of Cuba and the government of Venezuela, particularly from my knowledge, intimate knowledge with the government of Cuba, they are very concerned about preservation and the history and civilization.
Okay, are you going to collaborate with the National Trust in any more excavations anywhere around?
Well, we are going to do whatever is asked of us by the National Trust, because we know that they are working for the good of the country, for the development of the country. So we are going to collaborate with them to the extent that we can within the resources that we have available to us. But we are going to also be working with the National Trust on the relocation, the safe relocation of the petroglyphs, because that, you now know, is perhaps one of the most challenging tasks that we have within the airport zone at Argyle. And this is perhaps one of the things that we will continue to work on in the foreseeable future.
Following this, the IADC, again in collaboration with the National Trust, welcomed another group of archaeologists, this time from Leiden University, the Netherlands Antilles. This group continued to work at Escape on the site started by the Canadians, and also worked on a new area still at Escape. In addition to more artifacts from the Saludoid era and skeletal remains, they also uncovered artifacts from the Caillou and colonial era.
As many people will know, the Caribs had myths of their origins, and they said they originated from the Guyanas, from the Galibi Indians, and that is an area on the boundary between Suriname and French Guiana. And actually what we find here in the pottery is a reflection of that origin. And also what we find here at Argyle, and this is a pure site where we have been able to identify a lot of island Carib pottery. We find it associated, typically island Carib pottery, as you can see with these little embellishments, associated with pottery which shows scratched surfaces. And that is a material that is longer known in the Windward Islands, and it's older than what we find here. The island Carib, what we call Caillou ware. Now what does that mean? In the previous period that this was heavily used, this is typically the pottery of domestic ware. This is a local trade, a local ceramic trade, a local thing that was applied to the pottery of the people who were living here prior to the entry of the island Caribs. But we find it here combined with the island Carib pottery, and that means that, and that suggests that the island Caribs lived together with and intermarried with the local Amerindians. And so the local women of course still using the domestic pottery of previous times. So in one instance we have solved a couple of interesting problems. We have shown that the island Caribs came from the Guyanas, that they mixed with the local Amerindians, and they lived together, intermarried with the local Amerindians, with the women, and that the latter still continued to use some of their previously used ceramic features.
This exploration was followed by a second under the guidance of Alistair Bright, a student pursuing his PhD in archaeology at the University of Leiden, and then a third, headed by Professor Corin Hoffman of the University of Leiden, the Netherlands Antilles. During their exploration, they concentrated on the ridge just above the Argyle River, where the Caillou or island Carib people had their early settlements. Here, they discovered 3 round houses and another first, the discovery of an earth axe on the site, linking the Caillou people to that particular site.
But the pottery of the Carib is very interesting, and in Caribbean archaeology, so for us, very little is known about this. This is a style of pottery which is very close to a style of pottery in the Guyanas, which would confirm that the Caribbeans would have come from the Guyanas into the islands just before the colonization. And So this is how we study that, because the style is very similar to what we call the Coriabo style in the Guyanas. And that is the pottery of the related Caliña, which are the Carib people of the Guyanas.
So what the material?
The material is pottery. This is pottery, so made from clay pots. And this is just clay pots. But we look at the decoration, and from the decoration and the shape of the pot, we can see, hey, this is very close to what we know from the Guyanas.
Okay.
So you see, this is very interesting, and this has thus little to do with the Arawak, which were here before, and which we are finding also settlements around here. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a complete different style of clay pot they make. You can feel it, because you probably all know on St. Vincent they should have made the pottery for a long time, maybe now still. But you can see that this is quite hard. These are two pieces from the same pot, and at both sides they had, you know, these small handles.
Yeah.
So this is what we find yesterday.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so this is, so you recognize this? You recognize the design? Yeah. Well, you see, it is very close, and I think that there is also a relation between this pottery and what, you know, the you folks make for a long time here on the island. I think there is a continuation. And here you can see there's a, in the decoration here, there's a small animal. You see, it's like a frog or something. So you see with the eyes. Yeah. Then we have one very, very special piece. It's very small, but this proves that these people were living here also when the Europeans came to the island. Because here I have a small piece of a clay pot, and there is an inlay of a small European glass bead. You see? Yeah. You see? There's a very small bead which is encrusted in the holes, and you can see from the other holes that these beads were also in here. So it was decorated with European beads. That means that there was a sort of trade in the first period that they were here. There was a sort of trade between the Caribs and the Europeans. Okay, then another thing which we are finding a lot is stone tools. And you must probably know stone tools, because you can find a lot of them in agricultural fields, and a lot of course this one is very, very nice, and we found it here on the side. We think it has ceremonial use, you see, and they are known as the Vincentian eared axes. And in the 1920s there was an archaeologist who collected about 3,000 of them from St. Vincent without context. They were just coming from agricultural fields and so on, and they are now in the Smithsonian Museum in Washington. Wow. And this is the only one who has been found in the site, and this has been found in a circular house. In the house, so we have a perfect context for this. And isn't this beautiful? And you see how heavy it is. I would say that maybe it has a ceremonial use, because it is nearly too heavy to operate.
While all of these explorations were taking place, the IADC continued efforts to acquire close to 3 acres of land to be vested with the National Trust for the establishment of a cultural heritage park, part of the larger heritage plan. Once set up, the park is expected to host a fully restored sugar mill, and in keeping with that plan, a group of industrial archaeologists and students from Hartford University, Connecticut, were brought in to assist in identifying and tagging parts from the old sugar mill at Argyle to be preserved and moved to the Heritage Park. We spoke to the leaders of the group about their work.
Now, could you explain to us exactly what the project is that you are conducting here at Argyle?
There's actually multiple phases, but this is the first phase where we're just documenting this site, all of the machinery, the layout, the configuration, so that we have it for reference in the future to understand what this site was, how it functioned before the airport project impacts this site. So it'll all be documented for others to study in the future, including the university. They would like to make this a continuing course so that they can use this information and have it available for others.
Okay. Now, could you tell us a little bit about the course that you teach at the university, the name of the course, and how does it impact on, well, the lives of the students who are doing it, and exactly how does it impact on your work here?
Mm-hmm. Well, the course is very interesting. The course is industrial archaeology, but we really wanted the students to understand. They're engineering students for the most part, although we do have a liberal arts major as well. But we wanted them to understand the effects of this machinery, of this industry on the island, on the culture, and really understand history as a whole. So as engineers, when they design things, they understand that there's more than just the immediate purpose of the machinery. It really affects the economy, the culture, the way of life. So that was really the main goal of the course. Of course, we also want to understand this site in particular and have the history understood before the airport is complete.
Yeah. Al, having seen what is behind here, I know that you're doing this in collaboration with National Trust, the IADC in collaboration with National Trust. Realistically speaking, what can you do for us in terms of preservation?
Oh, I think we can do a lot. Some of the pieces, as you can see when you walked around the site, are very deteriorated, so at least we can preserve them in terms of what they were. We can document them, what their size was, how they worked, where they were located on the site, so at least we have a historical plan, which does not exist now, which is good. It tells a story, a very important story about the Argyle plantation. There are also several pieces that we do believe can be moved and preserved. I don't know an exact percentage, but I know that there's some nice significant pieces that we have not seen elsewhere on the island, especially with the arrowroot equipment that we can preserve at the future heritage site. So there will be a lot physically for people to see, and also we'll have documentation so people can read and understand what the site was. So we're feeling really good about what we can accomplish.
Okay, and then how does this benefit your course in terms of what you take back to Connecticut and to advance what you're doing there?
Well, what the students, a primary part of what they're doing here is collecting data to build 3D models of this equipment, to interview some of the local people and get an understanding of how the sugar industry impacted culture here. We're going to be trying to look at, for records of plantation ownership, prices of sugar, all these things. They're going to be the major thrust of the rest of the work in the class is going to be putting together a detailed archaeological report, detailing all the findings. They're going to be drawing up figures and everything, and that's going to be something that we share with the St. Vincent Trust as a report that they can use. It's also going to be the required reading for the next phases of this class. So when we start up the next course with new students, this is going to be the first thing that we give them. Say, all right, you got to digest all this material, and that's going to be how they start.
Shortly thereafter, and still in 2010, a decision was made to excavate an area just outside the offices of the IADC, thought to be rich in history. Subsequently, archaeologists from the first Canadian group proposed to the IADC's Board of Directors a public archaeology program, which was to excavate the area just in front of the offices of the IADC. Included in this program was the recruitment of volunteers through their website, persons who had an interest in archaeology and were willing to pay their way here. And according to lead archaeologist Margarita de Guzman, the Argyle International Airport Contributory Fund was also to benefit through a contribution from the program. The public program began in earnest on January 10th.
And I think it's important for all of St. Vincent to get an understanding of what we're finding here. So beyond the modern stuff that's been scraped away, we have some colonial presence in the area with the sugar mills, there's iron bits and pieces, and there's some historic artifacts, chinas, that you may find in your grandma's cabinet. But more importantly for us as archaeologists is the prehistoric materials. And so the stuff we're finding here, such as adornos and inscribed panels and big handles, this is dating maybe to the Saladoid period, almost 2,000 years before the present. So what we're documenting is a rich cultural history in this area, in St. Vincent, for maybe almost 2,000 years. And that's important for everyone, I think, to know. We're finding bits and pieces of pots. We have maybe the evidence of some burials, and so we'll have to examine those very closely and carefully to see where they come from. But it's important for all of St. Vincent, I think, to get an understanding of the culture that's here and that has been here for so long.
I'm very excited to be in St. Vincent. It is my first time. Very beautiful country and very welcoming. I'm here to volunteer as just a worker on the site here. I have an interest in archaeology and just heard about it on the website that they have, and I'm excited to come down and do what we can, and we've done some great work in the last 2 days.
Simultaneously, efforts continued to rescue the petroglyphs at Yambo that were resting on the western side of the runway fence. Following months of negotiations and numerous communication, a team from the Egyptian Ministry of Culture and the Department of Antiquities arrived in St. Vincent, compliments the government of Egypt. Their task: to study and advise the National Trust on the possible removal and relocation of the petroglyphs.
We are making a registration for the petroglyphs, and another one that's more important for the cracks we have, because this is very important to know what will be the statical behavior of the pieces when we cut. It will go like this, and to preserve the petroglyphs. This is what we worry about. Okay. How we cut, and this is what is hard about this job. We relocate a lot of monuments in Egypt, but it was a sandstone. So you can cut it, you can control where you want to cut, how you want to cut, according to the patterns or the petroglyphs we have. But here it's the rock is the hardest part of the job.
Okay, now I noticed that they're putting on the plastic sheeting on the rocks. Yeah. What is that process? What exactly are they doing?
This is a registration of the petroglyphs, the patterns. This is one for the archaeological matter, and the other for the fine restoration, to know the cracks, and we will study the cracks, the natural one, and there is a hairy cracks. This is going inside the pattern. This is our worry. We are cutting. We should make some of secured of the portion of the rock which is carrying the pattern.
Following 3 weeks of investigations by the Egyptian experts, it was determined that the petroglyphs can be successfully relocated, but more time was needed to source all necessary aids and to put together and execute a proper removal and relocation plan beginning in April 2011. The IADC is committed to the preservation of our heritage and to ensuring that its legacy remains one that not only contributed to building and shaping the future of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but one that helped preserve our heritage for generations to come.